Welcome back to Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. I am your host and the creator of this project, Ijoma Oluo. So we are finishing up talking about Black August with this post. It has been a really great month to discuss this with y'all. We talked about the history of Black August, and we talked about Black August's relationship to political prisoners. And now we're going to finish out our discussion by talking about what Black August means today and what it can mean for us in the future. In this episode, we will have more segments from my conversation with my partner Gabriel Teodros, as well as some segments from an older conversation I had with Rich Reseda, who was also featured in our last episode. So how did you learn about Black August? Did you learn it in school? Did you learn it from your family?
I first became aware of Black August. I learned about it in the early 2000s through the work of the Malcolm X grassroots movement in New York, which Dream Hampton was a part of. She did a film called the Black August Hip Hop Project that documented hip hop concerts that were happening initially in New York, but they spread to Cuba and to South Africa. And they were these beautiful concerts that also felt like moments of movement building in a very global Pan-African sense that were all about both the history and the need for continued struggle for Black liberation. And they also always centered political prisoners. These shows were fundraisers for people like Mumia Abu-Jamal and Mutulu Shakur, and they were just moments that kind of brought everything that I cared about together. And it was through that work that I learned about Black August. A few years later, I was working with CARA, Communities Against Rape and Abuse, and we started doing teach-ins at the East Cherry YWCA in the Central District. They were called Nat Turner teach-ins, and these were Black and people of color only spaces where we basically talked about the legacy of Black liberation movements. And we started with a workshop about the history of Nat Turner. And that was the first time I ever led a historical workshop. It was a big learning and growing moment for me.
Now more than 45 years since the first Black August, I find that Black August is more relevant and necessary than ever before. It is so important that we talk about Black August, what Black August has meant, and what it means to us today.
To me, what makes Black August really special, really important, and really vital is that it's different than February in that this isn't just like Black History Month. This is a month to really look at and examine and celebrate and learn from Black liberation struggles, like specific moments when Black people have fought back against genocide, against enslavement, against prisons. That's really important. And I think it's important because all of the systems that have oppressed Black people from the beginning of this country are still at play right now. We are still in a continued fight for Black liberation in this country. And sometimes I think when we look at Black history, as if we're done. You know what I mean? As if the struggle for liberation is done. We had a Black president once. There's a few Black billionaires, and now we've made it. Like that flattening of Black history is actually very harmful when you still have the highest number of people in prisons. And, you know, you could just go down the list of all the ways that Black people are specifically oppressed in this country and around the world.
I love that. And I think, one thing I love about Black August too, when I talk with young people, especially about Black History Month,
Uh,
young Black people, there's a lot of trepidation because it feels like whiteness has removed it from its original intent, right? Its original intent was to give us pride in our history and accomplishments. And whiteness has turned it often into like a history of Black suffering
mhm.
and this kind of, yeah, all in the past, as if the struggle of Black people for liberation is done. And
Right.
we have these very whitewashed ideas of Black liberation as well, and very capitalist ideas. And one thing I love about Black August is it reaffirms our right to be proud of our resistance.
That
And
part.
we live in a society that doesn't want us to be proud of resistance. And we're seeing this today with how Black people who dare talk active resistance are discussed and demonized and criminalized. We see this around the world. We see this the way that Palestinian resistance is criminalized, the way indigenous resistance has always been criminalized. And Black resistance has always existed. And we have every right to be proud of how we fight for ourselves and for each other. And a month dedicated to that, not only dedicated to that, I think, but centered in that
Yeah.
and centered in the stories and voices of Black liberationists, I think is so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you said it in the last episode, but I think it's really important to always center that Black August is a tradition that started in prison. It started by Black folks who were imprisoned to honor their fallen soldier, George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson, who were both murdered in the legacy of Black people trying to free themselves. Like, Black August really, to me, exemplifies and connects the struggle for Black liberation from plantations to prisons. These are all connected systems that we are fighting to be free from.
We live in a world that tries to commodify everything. And Black August, well, certainly not as commercial as other days and months, is definitely no exception. And it is so important that we protect Black August and that we are clear as to what Black August means. And this doesn't mean that if you aren't Black, you can't commemorate Black August or learn from Black August. But keeping Black August true to its roots is vital.
I feel like you can't commodify Black August. Like, it's not something that's meant to be played with. Like, corporations shouldn't get behind this. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Black August is still something that really should be from and for Black people. I feel like it's really important that in any move for liberation, the people who are fighting for their liberation get to tell their own story. That's what this is all about. We are celebrating and lifting up the stories of Black resistance, because when we don't tell our stories, we get written out of the pages of history. And so often, especially like growing up in schools here, when you read about Black history, stories of Black people fighting back just aren't taught, you know? I didn't learn about Nat Turner in school. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't learn about any of this in school.
Now, I agree. And I think, for non Black people watching this and wondering how they can engage with Black August, I think what's so important to this is what's important if you want to support any movement where you're not centered, where you're not the primarily impacted people, which is to protect the safety of the people doing that work,
Mm.
to protect the well-being of the people doing that work, to support that work without any preconditions, without any interference. It's fine to learn from it. I hope everyone learns from it. I want everyone to know that Black resistance is beautiful and
Yeah.
something to be proud of. So learn from it, be inspired by it, but don't try to alter it. Don't try to change it. Try to protect it as this beautiful product of Black community and Black strength that is first and foremost focused on helping Black people. But as long as it is, the entire world benefits. Every oppressed people benefit from any oppressed population's resistance. And so supporting it with that mindset, I think, is really important. So I think a lot of times non-Black people don't know how to engage with Black August. And it's not my primary concern, honestly. It's really not my primary concern at all. When they are afraid to engage with it, though, people will often delegitimize things that they feel like they're not a part of. And that can make it harder for other Black people to engage. The amount of Black people I know who know nothing about what Black August is, especially the amount of Black young people, because they're coming up in school systems and white-centered spaces that feel like they can't engage or view it as a threat to engage. And then the people doing work to educate around Black August maybe don't have the resources to get that information to a lot of people who could use it the most, including in prisons, especially I'd say people in our juvenile detention systems to understand what this means. Music, poetry, painting, writing, art in all of its forms has been vital to our survival and our resistance. And it's been vital to Black August as well.
I think so much of it for me is about remembering and imagining, studying the history and passing it on through the art to the best that we can is a part of it for me. And also imagining what those futures look like and what it means to actually live free. You know, art is one of the best places we have to imagine, to inform, and to also inform people's imagination. I just think it's one of the most vital things, one of the most vital tools, I think, in any movement, because it brings people together and brings different perspectives together that you might not see or hear. And with that, it's like anything is possible. Sometimes people have to see it first, and art is a way to show them a little bit.
And I always think too, especially when it comes to Black art, Black music, Black poetry, so much of that has a lineage. I
Yeah,
mean, it's as long as Black resistance. You know, it has
abs
a lineage carried over from Africa. And so I think it's beautiful because I think in it, it has like a DNA that
yeah.
speaks to revolution simply because it exists.
Every form of music, I would say, in America comes from Black American musical traditions. And pretty much every Black American musical tradition is tied up in Black resistance to white supremacy, whether it's the blues, whether it's gospel, those songs that turned into spirituals that were coded language that helped people travel through the Underground Railroad, whether it's jazz, soul, things that were called race music of the time, rock music. It was called devil music, but it expanded what people were doing, whether it's hip hop, which became the voice of a generation that felt like they didn't have a voice. Like all of these things are music of resistance for their time. And yeah, you can't separate that.
What is true is that my homies in prison are valuable people and I share their experience and I was there with them. And now I'm out here with more privilege and access than they have. So, how do I use what I have to honor my own story and honor my own community and help get them over here? Not because I'm a good person or I'm any better than them. I could have just as easily been in there with them. I went in prison with two strikes as a 19-year-old. I was one riot or bad day or some cop lying away from being in there for the rest of my life. I did nothing special that makes me better than anybody in there. So how do I use what is true to honor what is true? That's all I'm doing.
I would be remiss if we're talking about the role of art in Black August and in prison abolition to not talk about Richie Resita's film Songs from the Hole. I got to see this film last year and it's amazing, and I really, really recommend that y'all watch it. It's on Netflix right now. This is absolutely not an ad. I just love the film and I think it's a perfect example of art that is made to help us survive these horrific systems. It is a documentary following the journey and the struggle of JJ88, an artist, a Black man who was incarcerated at a very young age. And it's his struggle and his family's struggle and loved ones' struggle to help him survive and to get him free. And part of his survival is really tied up in the art that he makes. It's a really beautiful, educational, heart-changing film that I really hope that everyone sees. I really love all of the work that Richie Resita does. I feel like he has so much heart and he is so centered in liberation for us all in all of his work. And just like we can't separate Black August from its prison abolitionist roots and from the fact that it was started in prison, I also don't think that we can or should separate Richie Resita's amazing work from his lived experience as someone who was incarcerated in our prison systems.
People ask me like, well, why did you go to prison? And I say, like, if we're just gonna look at the raw truth of it, is I chose to rob stores, and y'all chose, we collectively chose to deal with that by holding me at gunpoint away from my family for they wanted 10 years. We changed the law and I gave them 7. That all of that is true. That is what happened. Like, responsibility, accountability is like a math problem. What are all the things that happened that led to this happening? Now we can either choose to look at what happened and what needs to change, or we can do the deservance thing of who was quote unquote wrong, which is imaginary, and who needs to be punished. And that way of thinking about accountability, who's wrong and who needs to be punished, is so deep in us because the colonizers brought it here with their colonial religions, that we do that in, social justice head ass spaces. We do that everywhere. We haven't really confronted that. Like, if our desire is to actually live in a world where everybody has what they need, live in a world where I meet my needs in a way that meets everyone's needs and nature's needs, then it requires us to operate on a different logic. The colonial logic will always have us looking at who deserves what, who's good and who's bad, and everybody has a different idea of what those things are because they're not real. It only exists in our minds.
There's so much we can do to honor the spirit of Black August now, year-round, and into the future. It is vital that we support our incarcerated kin, that we stay connected with them, that we support their legal funds, that we send them supplies, that we send them commissary. It is so vital that our people who have been locked away know that they are not forgotten, that they are still our family. It's also important that we continue to talk about political prisoners. And if you missed our episode on Black August and political prisoners, please check that out to learn more about the political prisoners that our country has today. And it's important that we educate ourselves on liberation and abolition. And it's important that we do everyday work to not only fight these systems, but fight the impact that these systems have on our hearts and our souls.
The act of undoing the impact of colonialism on my mind and body is healing to me. The act of like putting the pieces back together of myself, of the community, of the world, like that is healing as I understand it.
This entire project is dedicated to abolition and liberation. But what does it really mean to move away from carceral culture? This is the problem that I am focused on in so many of our episodes. And I really hope that if you are new to this series, that you'll go back and watch some of them. But fundamental to this is a shift in mindset that we really have to have. And that can be some of the hardest work we do. What does it mean to let go of the idea of punishment and revenge? What does it mean to let go of the idea of good people versus bad people? What does it mean to understand that nobody is disposable?
A big one that I think really controls us too, that I just want to make note of before we go, is the idea that there is bad people. That's a mythology. Like that's an idea. It's not true. It's not something you can inherently prove. It's just an idea that some people are just born bad. The idea of bad is also imaginary. These are mythologies that keep us afraid. And fear is a motherfucker. Fear will have us voting in some shit. Fear will have us doing things that are not even in our own best interest just because we're moving with so much fear. Work that I do with myself as a person is to try to release the colonial mythologies that I've just accepted as true because they were taught to me, like the idea that I have to be afraid of the people around me and that there are bad people out there. And one of the natural truths that I try to look towards and that give me hope, that I see in nature, that I see in plants, that I see in communities is when we're all doing well and we're integrated with each other, living in a way that suits each other's needs, there's nothing to be afraid of for real.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. I am your host and the creator of this project, Ijoma Oluwo. Now be sure to check out our episode notes for this episode and all of our episodes. I try to put as much information as I can, information that can really help you dive deeper and more further engage with this content. It's also where you can find all of our past episodes. This is also where you can become a paid subscriber to this project. All of this content is free for people to access, and it's my goal to make it as accessible as possible. This project is currently self-funded and funded by subscribers. So anything that you can give to this project helps me make the best quality content that I possibly can. I want to give a huge thank you to Richie Reseda and to my partner Gabriel Teodros for joining me for this episode. I will also have in the show notes the link to Richie Reseda's beautiful film, Songs from the Hole. Be sure to check it out. I hope that you've enjoyed this series. I hope that you have learned a lot about Black August and are inspired to keep the spirit of Black August with you throughout the year. Thank you, and I'll see you in our next episode.